It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna, welcome into a brand new edition of the Rico, episode 539. The Mets are in the midst of a 4-game series against the Miami Marlins on the heels of sweeping the Philadelphia Phillies 3 straight. So these 4-game series are so long that I like to do kind of a mid-series Rico, because if we sit here and try to analyze 4 games the way I go about things, it's going to take 2.5 hours. So let's call this a halfway through the Marlins series Rico Brogna. We'll obviously talk a lot about Jonah Tong's major league debut on Friday night, very successful major league debut, as well as the debacle that was Thursday. Because the one thing that a lot of us feared after sweeping the Philadelphia Phillies was that they would come out in a malaise and kind of fumble the bag a little bit after gaining 3 games on Philadelphia, after pulling within 4. You got to keep the momentum going. And unfortunately, on Thursday night at Citi Field, the Mets played one of their uglier games of the season. So before we get to Jonah Tong, before we get to Carlos Mendoza trying to use a freaking position player to close the game out, before we get to everything on Friday, can we let and get Thursday off of our chest? Because here's what I'm very mixed about. Like, I know that I can be emotional to certain games. There's certain games over the course of 162 that I get maybe a little pissier about. I think back not too long ago, less than a week ago, the Mets won 2 out of 3 in Atlanta, and I couldn't get past the way they lost Sunday. And it felt like even though they won a series in Atlanta, it was massively disappointing. But I also understand it's baseball. There are going to be days in which you just don't play well. There are going to be days in which your bats don't hit. And yes, there are going to be days in which your defense is very mediocre. The problem, and really what I battle with, is while I could look at Thursday's game and say, hey, it's baseball. It happens. Sure, they didn't hit a lot. Sure, they made 3 errors. Sure, Clay Holmes threw 1 million pitches in 5 innings. Sure, Gregory Soto is maybe who we thought he was. But it's baseball. It's 1 game. No worries. Just win the next day, which they did. The problem with all that sweet talk, all that realistic talk, is that the Mets have put themselves in a position where they can't afford games like that. They created a massive hole with Philadelphia, and while sweeping them earlier this week was great and got them within 4, the reason why I wasn't sitting there even after the sweep saying, oh, we're going to win the division or the race is on, is because making up 4 games in a short period of time, which a month is a short period of time, is not easy. It's not easy because I just said, hey, it's baseball. You have bad days. Well, they had a bad day. The Philadelphia Phillies are so excited they're not facing a team named the New York Mets that they've gone out and they've slapped the Braves around 2 days in a row. Well, one game they slapped them around. Kyle Schwarber hit 1 billion home runs. The other game they etched out a nice little 2-1 victory. And so that one trip up that the Mets had on Thursday cost them a game in the standings. And a game in the standings leaves them 5 games out with a month to go. That's not a great spot to be in. And if the Mets didn't trip up as badly as they did from June 13th on, then you could afford a bad day here and there. Look, this has been a great homestand, right? They're 4-1 now through 5 games as we record this late Friday night, early Saturday morning. And that seems good, and it is good. But they put themselves in a hole. So when you sweep the Philadelphia Phillies, and now you're facing a Miami team that you're better than, a Miami team that's playing basically 150 rookies, you can't go out there and kick the ball around. And that's what they did. Where do we begin? You want to begin with Clay Holmes? The weird thing about the Clay Holmes error in the 3rd inning, which was such a significant error, because think about it, at that point, it's a 2-2 game, and that miscue on the really nice play by Pete Alonso directly leads to 2 more runs and puts them in that 4-2 hole. If Clay Holmes catches a baseball in what was, I don't want to say a perfect throw by Pete Alonso, but a good enough throw by Pete Alonso. It's a 2-2 game in the bottom of the third inning, no harm, no foul. But instead, because Clay can't hold on to the baseball, not only does he give up an RBI hit to Otto Lopez one batter later, not only does the error lead to a previous run, but he tacks on 9 or 10 more pitches onto his pitch count. You have to make that play. What was so weird about it is that Pete makes the play or the fielding aspect of it, and then we're all expecting Alonso to lollipop it to Clay because that's what he does. I love Pete, but he lollipops throws on those plays to the pitcher covering. And instead, he threw a fastball, and maybe Clay Holmes was just surprised that that's what it was. He just didn't expect it. But a little miscue like that not only cost the Mets 2 runs, but it cost Clay Holmes how many pitches? Then you go to the 7th inning. And the 7th inning was just a cavalcade of horrible defense. That may have been one of the worst innings the Mets have played all season long, defensively. I mean, really all the way around. Because here they are in a tie game. Alonso, I don't want to say makes up for his miscue because I don't think he made a miscue on the Holmes play. He'd make one later. But he makes up for the deficit that was created by hitting a 2-run home run behind in the count in the 5th inning to tie the game up at 4. And then in the 7th inning, he makes a horrible error. Brandon Nimmo kicks a ball. Hayden Singer, who was catching that day, who's usually so sure-handed, commits a pass ball. And it was a mess. You even have Jeff McNeil trying to make a play at the plate where there is no play at the plate. Though Gary Cohen pointed out that Alonso was not covering first base. So on that ground ball hit by Otto Lopez that led to, I think it was Miami's 2nd run of the inning that made it a 2-run game, there was no play at first base because Pete wasn't there. So call that another miscue. I mean, that was just awful all the way around. And it's disappointing because when you're coming off a sweep of Philadelphia and now you're within 4 games, the place was electric for a few days, you want to keep that urgency going. And it's one thing to lose, which happens, it's baseball. It's another thing to play as just ugly as they did. And there were a lot of just bad things that came out of Thursday's game. You know, Clay Holmes' final line was 5 innings, 4 runs, 2 earned. It's not the worst. But it was just a very blah outing by Clay. Mainly because he throws way too many pitches. And he throws way too many pitches, which doesn't give him that chance to go deep into a game. So you have the Holmes issue. You have the Soto issue after getting off to such a good start after the acquisition. You know, Gregory Soto's been mediocre. Gives up that base hit that started the entire inning to Marcy. And then he gets Liam Hicks to hit the ground ball to Pete. Unfortunately, Pete makes this awful error. Pete has not had the greatest defensive series. He had some miscues in game 2, which we'll get to. He has the miscue in game 1, and it's like automatic, Hoff. You know who texts me every time Pete Alonso makes an error? Hoffman knows this better than anybody. Every time. It's like a jukebox every time Pete makes an error. Who texts me?
I'm going to take a wild one. Just shot in the dark. Salicata.
Every time. I had a good response for him because in game 2 of this series, we call it the Tong game, the 5th inning also featured some bad defense. It featured an error by Francisco Lindor in what should have been a double play ball and an error by Pete Alonso. So obviously, because Sal is a jukebox, he texts me, he's a terrible defender. It's all he writes. He's a terrible defender. And my retort was, don't be so harsh on Lindor. Errors happen. But look, I love Pete, and I think Pete is a better defensive first baseman than not just Sal gives him credit for, but a lot of people give him credit for. He's had a bad series. And that is being noted in the Rico I'm the Man Now and the net negative awards that we'll hand out in a couple of days. He's not had a good defensive series. And really, the Mets haven't had a good defensive series when you think about the way they played these first 2 games.
Yeah, but the biggest thing about Pete is, and we say it all the time, is he just looks awkward with everything he does. He's not like this. He's not Don Mattingly. He's not Matt Olson. He's not this perfectly like gifted. He's got to work for it, and he looks a little, I don't want to say sloppy, but he looks awkward doing everything. So that's why people criticize his defensive skills. That's all it comes down to.
I don't care how awkward he looks. This series, even though he's hit 2 home runs, he has 4 RBIs, so he's going to be a candidate for the Rico I'm the man now star of the series. He's made bad errors, and that's kind of the thing that's happened over these 2 games against Miami, and specifically Thursday's game because it affected them in a negative way and cost them the game. You had 4 plays right off the top that you cannot make when you're a winning team. Clay Holmes needs to squeeze the baseball on the Pete Alonso play, in which he made a good throw in the 3rd inning. It ends the inning, and it ends the inning at 2-2. But instead, since he can't catch it, it leads to 2 more runs and 10 more pitches. Alonso makes an error in the 7th inning, which leads to runs. Nimmo makes an error in the 7th inning. Senger commits a pass ball. You have 2 different moments in the game on Thursday in which McNeil is trying to throw a guy out at the plate that he has no chance on. So it was a really heads up your ass kind of game, but sometimes you can overcome that. You know, when Alonso hit the 2-run home run in the 5th inning and tied the game up at 4, I actually sat back confident, like, all right, they're going to find a way to win this game. What was disappointing is after Pete hits the 2-run home run, the Mets would then have 2 more hits the rest of the game. And they actually would not get another runner in scoring position the rest of the game. So as we've seen before with this team, and I've said this a lot recently, it's tough to kill the offense because the offense has been so good, and they certainly followed it up the following night. But in that game on Thursday, after Alonso hits the home run, the last 4 innings of this game against guys like Cade Gibson and Ronnie Henriquez and Calvin Faucher, it was nothing. The offense went to bed. Juan Soto had a very quiet day, going 0 for 4. They just didn't get much offensively. But this loss to me was a lot about the defense and the fact that Gregory Soto, who got off to a good start, who was in the circle of trust, I think you now look at and say, I can't trust him very much. And I think that's one of the issues the Mets are going to have to face over the next couple of days and weeks. They don't have a lot of trustworthy arms in their bullpen.
What are the requirements again to get in the circle of trust? It feels like we put them in too easy because there's just so few people. I mean, the fact is, like, Soto had like 3 outings, and we're like, all right, well, let's put him in. Put him in.
Yeah. I think we're too easy. I mean, right now the circle of trust is freaking Edwin Diaz.
Yes.
Hey, I think literally it has to stop right there.
Hey, and I'm going to toss something out there, and this is going to be, I don't want to say wild, but this is something that's reality. There's a guy that just got released that the Mets should actually just look into and see maybe there's something.
Walker Buehler.
I'm telling you, can it get any worse? Can it get any worse?
Yeah, I would be very curious. And I know Walker Buehler has not had a good year. If there's more to the Buehler release than simply, hey, he's been ineffective. The Red Sox called up their top pitching prospect. Like, I wonder if there's more, because Buehler out of the bullpen is very intriguing. He's intriguing because, A, he did it to close out a World Series last year. So start with that. I mean, when you go to a guy and he's able to come in the most pressurized situation in the world and get the job done, that's pretty damn impressive. He also came out of the bullpen in the Boston Yankee series. They finally moved him to the bullpen. And I actually scored that game. I'm trying to remember how he did, and I'm looking at it right now.
Oh, wait, what?
Yeah, I scored Yankees Red Sox. That's right. He pitched well for a while, and then he gave up a home run to Jazz Chisholm in the 8th inning, but it was an extended bullpen appearance. Yeah, I'm not against it. I'm really not, because and it shows you how quickly things change in baseball. 3 weeks ago, we're sitting back looking at the roster saying, the bullpen is loaded. They need starting pitching. Now it's like the opposite. They're going to run with a 6-man rotation, and they don't have enough bullpen arms. And the reason they're going to run with a 6-man rotation was Jonah Tong on Friday night. I went to the game. I was excited to see that Tong. Let me see that Tong. I was very excited to see Jonah Tong. And here's what I'll tell you about his performance. I thought he was good. His windup, yes, everyone's saying it. It's so true. reminds you of Tim Lincecum, especially his finish. The fastball doesn't pop with velocity, but I guess it's tough to read out of his hand. He's got a good slow curveball. He had really good command in this game. And I think anytime that you have a young pitcher, especially one who's making their major league debut and as inexperienced as him, seeing someone come out and command the strike zone, I think is pretty impressive. So I thought, overall, I thought he was good. That first inning was hilarious because he threw 5 pitches, pitched a 1-2-3 inning. And I'm not a believer in jinxes. But after the 5-pitch first inning, Jet was next to me, and he says, wow, this may go down as the quickest game of all time. It's on pace to be a 1 hour, 10-minute game. And I'm like, come on, buddy. What are we talking about? I know he had a 5-pitch first inning. Then the Mets proceed to have the longest bottom of the first inning ever. And really after that, every inning took a lot of time. But Tong had the easiest first inning known to man. What he did in the second inning was also really impressive because it gives up that leadoff double to Otto Lopez, a ground ball that off the bat, I thought for a second Vientos was going to have a chance to dive and knock down, but it gets past him, gives up the ground out to Liam Hicks that advances the runner, gets lucky on a line out by Norby right at Lindor, and gets Troy Johnston on the comebacker. So great poise, very McClain-like, to work through runner on second, nobody out. Then he does it again in the third inning. He gives up a leadoff blue pit to Wagenman, gets his first major league strikeout against Weimer, gives up another blue pit that looked like it hit Brandon Nimmo, that little blooper down the left field line. And Brandon slides, and at least it looked from where I was sitting like the ball clunked against him. But it set up another great scoring opportunity for Miami, and he gets the looking strikeout of Marcy and the ground out of Ramirez. So really good kind of battle by Tong in the second and third inning. Now, I'd be remiss to not mention that when he was battling with these great Miami scoring opportunities, he had a 5-0 lead and a 12-0 lead. So it was a little bit easier, but still, much like McClain a few days earlier, we're all sitting there thinking, we don't want to see him give up any runs. He don't want to give up any runs. And, Steve Gelb's brought this up in the postgame, but there is some truth to this. It cannot be easy if you're Jonah Tong making your major league debut and having to sit there and wait not just once through a long inning, but twice through a long inning. And Tong's answer was perfect. Like, hey, I'll take the run support. I could sit there all day if you're going to give me 5 runs and 7 runs. And obviously that's true. I mean, you want some run support. You don't want to be DeGrommed where basically you get no help. But it can't be easy that you throw a 5-pitch first inning, you go into the dugout, and you sit there for 40 minutes while the Mets pound Yuri Perez. And what really ended the game early, and I like Yuri Perez. He's coming off Tommy John surgery. He's pitched well. I'm not going to tell you he's an ace or anything like that, but he's got really good stuff and is a really good young pitcher. It's not like the Mets beat up some bum. So when he walked Lindor to start the game and he gives up the home run to Soto and he gave up a base hit to Pete Alonso with 3 batters in, Jets saying, hey, when are they going to take him out? And my answer to him was, he's a good pitcher. And one thing about good pitchers, I didn't say great pitcher because he's not great yet, but he's a good pitcher, is you better get to him early because a lot of good pitchers are able to settle down. And at 2-0, I'm fearful that the Met bats are like, oh, we're done. Gave you 2 runs. Perez fights through the first inning, and then all of a sudden we have ourselves a game. But the Mets were able to not only work deep counts, but obviously pound them some more. Vientos walks. Nimmo hits a 3-run home run. Then, even though they were outs, Marte and Beatty give you long at-bats with hard contact to where his pitch count is 39 with 2 outs in the first inning, and he's coming off Tommy John surgery. He's not staying in the game. So I was even explaining to my son, like, they're not taking him out because of the just flat-out ineffectiveness, because giving up 5 runs in the first inning sucks, but you can very well go pitch 4 scoreless after that, make your line look halfway decent, and at least keep your team in the game. But the problem was you got a guy coming off a major injury whose pitch count is way too high in the first inning. Once the Mets were able to get him out of the game because he threw as many pitches as he did, this game was over because you knew they were going to be able to annihilate this Marlin bullpen. First Tyler Zuber, then Valente Baezo, but really Zuber, who they destroyed in the second inning when Alonso went opposite field. Marte had an RBI hit. Taylor had a 2-run double. Lindor had a 2-run double. And there is something awesome when you're up 12-0 in the second inning, but also something like, oh my God, I'm going to sit here now for 7 innings. That's what I was thinking. I think that because I'm with a child. And so I think when you're with a kid, it's like, all right, it's 12-0. He knows the game is over. What are we going to do for the next 2 hours? We could watch the game. I'm good with watching the game. And we mostly did. But then we went out to Kiddie Field. Didn't do Kiddie Field because that's for the kitties. But they got an area back there where you can throw and they check your velocity. And they put it up on the big screen as well as a contest. But people wait online. They throw the baseball. They check the velocity. So that was pretty cool in the middle of this game. But no, I'm not complaining about being up 12-0. I want to make that clear. It was just the thought of, wow, okay, it's 12-0 in the second inning. Jeez. And the game never sped up from that point. I thought maybe, you know what? It's 12-0 in the second inning. Final score will be 13-3. And that was certainly not the case. The Met offense cooled off for a while until the 8th inning when the Marlins went position player. But obviously, Jonah Tong had some of his issues. Let's get to the 5th inning because I got a big issue with Carlos Mendoza here. I do. Jonah Tong gives up a base hit to start the 5th inning. Okay, no problem. Gives up an RBI single to Eric Wagaman. Okay, it happens. Strikes out Joey Weimer. And then what really sent this inning to just the shits was Francisco Lindor, followed by Pete Alonso. Because Xavier Edwards hits a ground ball that, even though Xavier Edwards is fast, is a double play that should end the inning. Now, if I'm not mistaken, if that double play is turned by Francisco Lindor, the pitch count of Tong is probably about 80. In fact, I get added up right now. 77, 172, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 83. Okay? Would have been 83. And at that point, if you're Mendy, you could say, you're done, 5 good innings, you got a big lead, pitch count of 83, we'll see you later, or you could even squeeze out a 6th inning. Instead, Francisco Lindor, in his hurry, drops the throw from Brett Beatty, an inexcusable error by a Gold Glove caliber player. He not only can't turn the double, he can't even get an out. And then right after that, what happens? The very next pitch, Jacob Marcy hits a ground ball right at Pete Alonso, and he can't make the play. And so on back-to-back pitches by Jonah Tong, 2 guys who should make this play 99% of the time commit brutal errors. What I am thinking at this point, with the game now 12-2 or 12-3, I think at the 12-2 at this point, is not the score. It's not the earned runs or the ERA, because these runs are going to be unearned. It's the pitch count. It's the fact that here's a kid who usually averages in the low 90s when it comes to pitches. And now, because of some bad defense, his pitch count is exploding. And if they take him out prior to him completing the 5th inning, he can't get a major league win, which would suck when you were given a 12-0 lead. And while I admit it sucks, who cares about wins? Like, does anybody? Do we even look at wins? The only reason we care about this win is because it's first major league win. But wins don't matter anymore. We all know that. So if you're Carlos Mendoza, why are you allowing Jonah Tong to continue to throw pitches? He gets the foul pop-up. He gives up a 2-run single to Otto Lopez. And now he's going through this long at-bat with Liam Hickson, which he got completely bailed out because strike 3 was not strike 3, unless it's Aaron Judge at the play, because it's that low strike that always gets called on Judge. And Tong ends the game, and his pitch count is 99, 98. You can't let that happen. It's such a hypocrisy. Like these managers, and Mendy's one of them, they are such hypocrites, man, when it comes to pitch count. If Tong's pitch count was 95 through 7, they couldn't wait to get him out. But because he's trying to get this victory, this W, which means absolutely nothing in 2025, they're going to push him to throw more pitches than they would have allowed him if he threw 7 innings. So he officially threw 97 pitches. And I was looking at his minor league kind of box scores this year. He's only had one game where he's thrown more pitches than that. And the game he did it in, he pitched into the 7th inning. This one was 5. I just thought it was careless. That'd be the word I'd use. It's careless. I'm not mad. It's careless. It's hypocritical. It's not consistent. And I think when you have a young pitcher who's only 22 years old, who you're going to use in a prominent role from here on out, why are we going so crazy for a victory? I just don't think it matters anymore. And maybe I'm not the relic. I'm the opposite. And I've been anti-win since I was a kid. I'm anti-win since the Steve Ontiveros, Jack McDowell conversation. Now you may say, what the hell is that? Who's Steve Ontiveros? I was very young, probably 10, and I asked my dad a million questions. And I think Steve Ontiveros at the time led the league in ERA. And so I said to him, is he going to win the Cy Young? My dad said, no, he's not going to win the Cy Young. Jack McDowell's going to win the Cy Young. Meanwhile, Jack McDowell had an ERA that was very similar to that of Anthony Young, as Anthony Young was going through his historical losing streak. And I couldn't get my head around that. I said, Dad, that doesn't make any sense. Like if they're giving up the same amount of runs just because that guy gets run support or that guy has a really good bullpen, like what are we doing? And then Kevin Brown had a year in Texas where he had a really low ERA, but he didn't get run support. And so I started questioning this at a very young age. And I'm not saying I'm cutting edge or anything like that. I didn't do anything with it. It was more, that didn't make sense to me. And so here I am all these years later, a proud anti-win guy. I've always been an anti-win guy. And so when I see a young pitcher being pushed to 96 pitches to get him a win, which really doesn't mean anything, I think it's careless. Now, I know Pete Hoffman disagrees with me. So, Pete, sound like a relic and tell me why wins matter so much, and I'm an idiot.
I don't think that wins matter, but I will say this. I agree with Carlos Mendoza keeping him in because he didn't deserve that outcome. Lindor and Alonso screwed that inning up for him, and I think that he knew the kid. They were in a comfortable spot. They were fine. He was going to get out of that inning. He was doing everything to get out of the inning anyway. So I think Mendoza had more trust in him than he would with Minaya or freaking Holmes or anybody else in that spot, to be honest with you.
You got to remember, though, things even out in life. So when you say he deserved to get through the inning, you're right. Pete Alonso made a bad error. Francisco Lindor made a bad error. But you know what else also happened in this game? We're going to talk about deserving things. They gave him 12 effing runs in the first 2 innings. I mean, come on. That's not normal. You know, some pitchers get 0 runs in their first major league start.
Yeah, there was actually a stat out there that I think Jonah Tong in his first game as a Met had more support from the Mets offense than Jacob deGrom in his career.
I mean, that's not far off. Well, hopefully the run support he got is a sign of things to come. What's funny about Jake, his major league debut came against the Yankees. He pitched 7 innings, allowed 1 run, and they lost the game 1-0. And who knew? I certainly didn't know it at the time that was going to be a sign of things to come, that basically his entire career would be brilliant, but the Mets can't give him runs. Hopefully Jonah Tong's career is they just give him a crap load of runs. But great job by the Met offense. I do want to give them their flowers for what they did. You know, Juan Soto hit a 2-run home run early. Coming up, I'm not sure when we're going to do it. Maybe one of the off days. We will go through every Juan Soto home run and rate it as clutch, not clutch. Who gives a crap? 2-run home runs in the first inning to me are clutch. they set the tone for a game. And so Juan Soto's 2-run home run early set the tone for the game. Brandon Nimmo's 3-run home run a few batters later basically said, hey, this game's going to be easy. And then you look at Tyrone Taylor coming through with a couple of doubles. He drove 4 runs in this game. Marte had another hit. Nimmo tacked on another home run. Pete Alonso hit a 2-run home run. Lindor had 2 more RBIs. I mean, basically, I'm looking at my box score trying to find someone who did not have a good offensive day. And there's really nobody. I mean, Luis Torrens was 0 for 3 with a walk until he faced a position player, and then he hit a 3-run home run as the Mets piled it on in the 8th inning. And speaking of position players, so it was fireworks night. So when the game was over, I sat there, I watched the fireworks with my son, and the talk of the section, because I had a few people come up to me saying the exact same thing. Not Jonah Tong. Wasn't about Jonah Tong. Wasn't about Juan Soto. Wasn't about Lindor. Wasn't about the offense. It was about Mendy's decision to pitch Luis Torrens in the 9th inning of a game that was a blowout. At the time, it was 19-5 when Mendy decided to go to Luis Torrens in the 9th inning. And many of the people I ran into were very upset. In fact, I've got a few emails of people upset. Jimmy K writes, Mendoza is an idiot. Was it worth saving a bullpen arm to have a 30-minute 9th inning where someone could have gotten injured? This isn't a joke. The Mets shook off the malaise from last night, and Mendoza brought it back. He sucks, Evan. He sucks. No respect for the game, his players, or the fans. That wasn't saving a bullpen. That was trying to be the smartest guy on the field. Sean James has a different aspect of Torrens pitching. He's too important at shutting down the run game to be messing around with this. So, I always want to be honest. When I saw Torrens warming up to start the 9th inning, I actually did like it. And I do want to defend why I liked it. The Mets are in this weird spot. It's a spot that we speculated about back in March, but we haven't had a chance to talk about during the season because they haven't done it. And that is when you live in a world with a 6-man rotation, which the Mets are now entering, you have 1 fewer arm out of your bullpen. Throughout the regular season, you've got 8 arms in your bullpen because remember, you're maxed out with 13 arms that you're allowed to carry. So if you have 5 guys in your rotation, that leaves 8 bullpen arms. Right now, the Mets have 6 guys in their rotation with 7 bullpen arms. So they are short a bullpen arm, even if tomorrow Jose Castillo is going to get DFA'd and they're going to get a fresh arm. Either way, they got 7 bullpen arms. Mendy gets the 5 out of Tong. Okay, we all agree. It wasn't going more than that, obviously. He got the inning out of Helsley. He got 2 out of Castillo. And now he sees 5 more days without an off day. Probably 1 roster move coming because I do assume Jose Castillo will get DFA'd. It's possible by the time people are listening to this, Rico Brogna, that would have already happened. But he knows he's got to be creative with his bullpen. He doesn't have a ton of arms. And so you look at who's available. He's not going to use Raley. He's not going to use Soto. He's not going to use Rogers. He's certainly not going to use Diaz. So it's Ryan Stanek, who they may have to use Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or can I steal 3 outs? Guys, he has a 14-run lead. 14-run lead. Even with Torrens throwing batting practice the way Sanoja threw batting practice the prior inning, Sanoja gave up 6 runs. And that sucked, right? It was really bad. It made the game. He'd have to give up double plus 2 for this game to become close again. It's 19-5. So going to Torrens, I didn't hate. I'd be a hypocrite if I hate it. I didn't hate it. Now, what ended up happening was obviously frustrating. The first thing Torrens did that he cannot do, I don't care if he's a pitcher or not, is walk the leadoff hitter. You're up by 14 runs. The whole point is you're going to throw the ball. It's going to be hit. Hopefully it's right at somebody. He got the next guy out, the pitcher, really not the pitcher, position player Javier Sanoja. And then he gave up back-to-back home runs. And even at that point, it's like, this is kind of annoying, but no big deal. when he gave up another hit to Norby and then the triple to Johnston, that's when the crowd was like getting nuts and Mendy came out and made the change. But even at that point, it's 19-8. Or 19-9, whatever it was at that point. Like, you're not in danger of losing the game. I almost thought, you know what? You've committed to this. Just let him get the last 2 outs. Now, the follow-up would be, at what point, though, Evan, do you say, oh, I have to go to a real pitcher? And I'll answer that for you. He's already gotten an out, so you only need 2 more outs. I think if it got to 6 runs, I'd say, okay, fine. But it didn't get to 6 runs. So I know that angered a lot of people, but don't we understand what was going on here? It was 19-5. Like, Jesus Christ, you really thought Torrens was going to give up 14 runs? That wasn't going to happen. But Mendy, I guess, felt the peer pressure of the crowd getting pissy and finally goes to Ryan Stanek. And thankfully, Ryan Stanek just comes in and gets the job done. But I don't know how you felt, Hoff. In the moment, I wasn't hating it because I understood it.
I got it, and I was fine with it. I think you tell me if I'm wrong because you were there. I was just watching on TV. The game was dragging, and most people were there because of the fireworks.
Yes.
And you've now had 3 or 4 very, very long innings. Let's get this freaking thing. All they kept on showing was kids in the crowd, kids in the crowd, kids in the crowd. Yeah, because they're waiting around for fireworks. It's 10:30 at night. What the hell are we doing?
I get it. I felt the same way. Look, I told you when it was 12-0, I looked around thinking, oh my God, I hope my kid doesn't get bored over the next 2.5 hours. Like, I get the family aspect of it, but that's not Mendy's job. Mendy's job isn't to babysit our kids. His job is, I got a game on Saturday, I got a game on Sunday, got 3 in Detroit. I don't want to waste bullpen arms. I think what annoyed me about Mendy is the fact he gave in so quickly. He should have given some reds.
So quickly?
He should have got, you know what he should have done at that point? He should have flipped Torrens and Sanger. And said, all right, Hayden, you pitch, and you, Luis, go behind the plate. But I wasn't angry by it. I think that he did not want to waste a bullpen arm. And this is a real discussion now. They're going to keep Tong in the rotation, which I am all for. Okay, I'm not against it at all. I think right now the Mets are tailor-made for a 6-man rotation. David Peterson is better with an extra day. Kodai Senga is better with an extra day, even though he hasn't been good with the extra days either. Clay Holmes could benefit from an extra day. The only guy who I think we would look at and say, screw the extra day, is Nolan McLean, because he's looked so good over his first 3 starts. But obviously the Mets can benefit from a 6-man. The problem is they're 1 short in the bullpen. And that's going to take, and they're not going to use any of these starters. I've always thought that the future of baseball and what I would love to see is a 6-man rotation, and then one of your starters every 3 days is available out of the bullpen since they're getting an extra day of rest. So in the case of the Mets, like a guy who makes sense in that is David Peterson because he did it so well last year. So 3 days after he makes his start, Peterson is starting on Saturday. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday is available out of the bullpen. And that would be a way to kind of give yourself an extra arm. But right now, I don't think the Mets are going to do that. We still have, actually, we only have a few more days till September 1st where they can get the extra arm. So I guess we're not that far away from it. I keep forgetting it's August 30th already.
Yeah, you got 2 days. Basically, Monday, you get to call people up.
Monday, September 1st?
Yeah.
Shit. Okay. That's not that bad. So then 6-man rotation basically means you got the same amount of guys in your bullpen starting on Monday. All right. I feel a lot better about the calendar. But I do love that Tong's going to remain in the rotation and continue to challenge him. You know, this was a weird one. Dan made this great point in the email. He writes, a 22-year-old getting the ball in his first start of his career in this spot of the season after the puke of a loss from the previous night is crazy. But the offense ending the game for him by the time he was taking the mound in the 3rd inning is even crazier. Has a debut ever gone from having some of the most pressure you could have to the least in the span of 2 innings? It's a great point. I mean, it's It's true. Like he came in with pressure because, yes, they're in a pennant race. Yes, they had lost the previous night. But even amongst our eyes, like, all right, we've seen Nolan McLean. What can you do? And Nolan McLean has set a very high bar with the way he's pitched over his first 3 starts. But I love the fact that the Mets are giving these guys a chance, and we'll see what happens. And we'll see if Tong can build off of this. I guess his next start would be in Cincinnati, which all of a sudden doesn't feel like a big series because the Reds have pooped themselves. They've lost 4 straight games, and so the Mets have opened up now a 5-game lead in the wild card race. So what has happened over the last few days is, unfortunately, the division got worse with the trip up on Thursday and the Phillies winning back-to-back games. They still have the 4 games with Philly, so sure, they still have a shot, but they've certainly created more room with Cincinnati. And it's not just the 5-game lead over Cincinnati, because think about it, the Met lead over a wild card spot is the same as their deficit for the division. But I think what makes it truly unique is that Cincinnati's a 500 team now. And there's been skepticism on, can they keep this up? Can they play good baseball the final month of the season? And obviously they've been tripped up over the last 4 days. So, no, it does feel like the playoff spot is becoming more secure.
And here's the other thing, too. They actually are gaining ground. They might not be gaining a lot of ground on the Phillies, but they are gaining ground on the Padres. That's now 2 games behind the second wild card spot. So it depends. I mean, listen, do we want to sit here and start picking and choosing? Okay, well, if we can get to the number 1 wild card game, this is who will play. Does it make a difference? Just get in the playoffs?
It doesn't, because first of all, this is baseball. So picking your opponent or preferring an opponent is so irrelevant. It really is. Like in the NBA, I think it's a little bit different based on matchups. There's no they match up well with this team. I know the Mets have kicked the Phillies' ass. Come on. Have we not been around long enough? 2015 Mets against the Cubs, the 88 Mets against the Dodgers, where owning of a team doesn't necessarily mean it's going to continue in the playoffs. So you mentioned they're catching up on San Diego, and they do have that series with the Padres in a couple of weeks. If you catch San Diego, you're playing Chicago in the first round of the playoffs, likely at Wrigley Field, unless you catch the Cubs too, which then it's a horse of a different color because you got the games in your own building. And the Mets have been a far better home team than road team. So home field advantage, totally get it. Understand why that's important. The Mets are 10 games under 500 on the road, 9 games under 500 on the road. But the difference between playing Chicago and playing Philadelphia and even playing LA, who I'm not that afraid of in a best of 3 series, I just, it doesn't matter. I know that may sound crazy. Like, what do you mean it doesn't matter? The Dodgers are so good. It's a best of 3. Like, it's such a minuscule sample size that I can't get nuts about the team they face in the wild card series. Home field, yes. Who we play, I don't know, man.
All right. I was asked this question. I was on a podcast earlier yesterday.
Look at you.
I'm gonna present it to you now, because now after the past couple games and whatever, if the playoffs started today, who is starting game 1 for the New York Mets?
Well, this is a very complicated question, because long before Buck Showalter played the game of 3 years ago or 2 years ago where he held back Jacob deGrom, I'm a big holdback guy. So the question shouldn't be who should start game 1, because that's not the answer you're looking for. What you should ask me is, who are the 3 starters in a postseason series? And I think that answer is David Peterson, Nolan McLean, and right now, believe it or not, Kodai Senga. Yeah. I'd still put Senga. First of all, Jonah Tong's made 1 major league start. So let's pump the brakes here. 5 innings against a team filled with rookies in Miami. Let's see Tong do it a few more times. And he's going to get a shot. So is it possible? I'm sitting here in a few weeks saying Tong's one of the guys. Absolutely. But not yet. I think I'd go Senga, because I think Mania can be more, and Holmes can be effective out of the bullpen. I think I load up my pen in a wild card series with Mania and Holmes, while Kodai, I don't know what he does out of the bullpen. So my 3 starters as of now, as of today, save the tape, August 30th, 2025. would be Nolan McLean, David Peterson, and Kodai Senga.
Oh, and by the way, just because you said August 30th, 2025, in this date in Hoffman history, my parents got married 50 years ago today. So
wow.
Congratulations.
That's a
5-0.
big anniversary.
Yeah.
Well, happy anniversary of the Hoffs, 50. I hit 10 the other day. In fact,
hey,
we started the podcast and it was my anniversary. We ended the podcast and it's the Hoffs anniversary.
Let's go.
Yes. Now, the Mets do play a game on Saturday, and I got a pick for you guys. My picks have been red hot, presented by FanDuel. The pick segment, of course, is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. The Mets scored 19 runs. I know my baseball team. They are probably going to be shut down by Edward Cabrera. The Mets also didn't strike out a lot in this game. They will probably strike out a bunch of times, courtesy of Edward Cabrera. Edward Cabrera's strikeout over-under number is at 5.5. You can get minus 114 odds. I would take the over. So sometimes I give you negative bets. I apologize, just like I did the under with Kodai Senga innings. So for Saturday's Mets-Marlins game, I am taking the over on Edward Cabrera strikeouts at 5.5. Once again, that was the pick segment brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
Let me tell you something. Though you might make it a negative, at the end of the day, people hit their bet, and Mets still won the game.
Exactly. If they win the game, who cares? I've got a bunch of angry emails about Ryan Helsley. Alex writes, Evan, I'm listening to Hell's Bells in the 6th inning for a pitcher with a 10 ERA. What the hell are we doing?
Oh, wait, did he come out to the whole big charade?
He did, yes.
Oh.
Yes, he did. And he responded by giving up a leadoff double and then getting the next 3 guys out. This is the role Helsley has to have for now. I am very open-minded. There could be a day in which I say, okay, he's earned his way back into getting some high-leverage spots. This was not a dominant performance, but I do give him credit because he worked around the leadoff double. But no, I think the Mets still need to have soft landing spots for him. Just keep this in mind. Hell's Bells is his walkout song. Every reliever has a walkout song. The issue isn't the music. The issue is the histrionics that go with it. That is what the Mets have to retire for the time being.
Yeah, but like, say, for example, if Edwin Diaz came in the 6th inning, would they not play the trumpets?
Edwin Diaz doesn't have a 10 ERA as a New York Met.
That is a good point.
In fact, I'm glad you brought that Diaz thing up. Remember, he came in to, I think it was the game they got eliminated by the Padres in Game 3. He came in the 6th inning. Yeah, and people made a big deal that they played the trumpets, and I'm like, what the hell's the problem? It's not his fault that they were getting their ass kicked by Joe Musgrave. So it's really about the pitcher performance more than it is when the inning is. But very important now for the Mets to win these next 2 games. Win the series, take the next 2 against Miami, and if they can accomplish that, you are looking at a 6-1 homestand. That's the goal. It's not going to be easy with Edward Cabrera and Sandy Alcantara on the mound, but that's what needs to be done because now the Phillies are getting hot because they don't have to stare at the Mets.
Can I just say something? Go back to Ryan Helsley really quickly because they were talking on the broadcast that he obviously thinks he's tipping pitches and they're trying to work this out. And then obviously as they're talking about that, the first thing he does is he gives up a double down the line. So
on a slider.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what he's doing, but it's clearly not working. And they figured this out with Luis Severino. And who else did they figure it out too? Somebody else was tipping pitches, and they figured it out rather quickly. So why have they had the issue with Helsley?
I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know. It could be as simple as we know he's tipping pitches. We just can't figure out necessarily what everyone else is seeing. But look, it is a minor step in the right direction to pitch a scoreless inning, even if it involved giving up a leadoff double. They just got to take their time because he cannot be put into a 1-run game anytime soon. Maybe at some point, but not anytime soon. We'll have a Rico Brogna episode 540 recapping the series at some point Sunday night. So make sure you subscribe and you won't miss it. Thank you very much for checking out another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.